What's going on, guys? Today you are in for a treat. We're kicking off a series where I'm going to be going back in time and looking at Nelson from 20 years ago. I'm going to be showing you some games from my very first ever tournaments, and we're going to compare how I used to think to how I think now. Some of the moves that I played back then versus what I would play now, and really talk about how my thought process has changed. I actually just went through my closet and dug up all of these are like my old notation pads, notation books, random notation sheets, all these games from when I first started playing. So I was about 900 rated out of my first tournament, and then over the years improved until eventually making 2200. So you're going to get to see games from all through that process. I think this is going to be super helpful to a lot of people, and so make sure to let me know if you like this kind of video. But now let's jump into some of the games. All right, so the very first tournament that I ever played in, I didn't actually notate the games. And so those games are completely lost. We will probably never know what happened. But the first tournament where I actually notated was 1997 Super National. So this was a tournament that was open to everyone in the nation. I played in the K through 3 section at the time, and I'll give you one guess who won the tournament. If you said Hikaru Nakamura, you are correct. He was kind of like the same age as me, so I would see him in some of the same tournaments, and he was always several steps ahead, and so nothing new there. But anyway, this was the first round of that tournament, and so I was white playing against Alexander Rice, who was rated 875, and here we go. All right, so D4. At the time, I didn't know anything about openings at all. I had no idea that there was opening books that you could study and learn, and that there were names to opening. I didn't know anything. I just knew, like, hey, let's try to control the center. I had played with my dad a little bit, and yeah, I just like to play d4. I don't know why. Bishop f4, knight c6, knight c3. Now, at this moment in the game, black played knight f6, and I had an idea, and you may be able to see what I was planning, but I had an idea behind developing both of these pieces. And so I'll give you a second if you want to figure out what do you think I probably played in this position based on the fact that I moved these two pieces first. Well, if you said knight to b5, you are correct. I'm basically just going for this cheap little fork where I'm going to attack the rook and the king. And it turns out it's very annoying and not really easy for black to prevent. And so this is kind of a good learning opportunity. If someone is lining up one of their bishops, in this case my bishop on f4, if they're lining it up on either one of these squares, you want to make sure you're paying attention, like what happens if the knight jumps in and attacks it again. Because if you wait until it's too late, like my opponent did, well, then you're just in a bad situation. And so now at this point, black doesn't have any good ways to really defend this square. And so my opponent played the only thing they could do, e5, to basically block the bishop from going there. So I captured it, which is pretty good. And then we have knight to h5. I played bishop to d2. And so, first of all, it's good that I noticed that my bishop was under attack, right? That would have been a huge blunder if I didn't see that. And so I moved it away, which is not terrible. Now, this is kind of a passive place for the bishop because I am blocking my queen from being able to do anything. If I was playing this position now and someone played this move on me, I would probably play e3 or maybe bishop g3. But the point behind, like, let's say e3 is that now if black captures, I'm just going to recapture. I've got my pawn nicely defended, and my bishop's ready to go and come out. Right? I didn't waste time. While black was kind of doing some shenanigans with the knight, I was getting ready to develop my pieces. So, that's what I would do now, rather than just simply run away. But, it's not a terrible move, but there are other options besides just retreating that would have been a little better. So black plays a6, and now I had to retreat my knight, which, okay, knight c3, that's totally fine. d4, and now I played knight to b1. And, again, pretty passive. You can see I was not afraid. I just didn't know the best way to react to the threats, right? And so I was just doing the best I could, like, oh, well, I got to save my knight, which is something. But a better option would have been to go to like e4, right? I'm still saving my knight, but I'm not putting it back on the starting square. I'm keeping it centralized where it can do a lot more things, right? And so that's definitely something that I would have done differently had I been playing today as opposed to then. But so anyway, knight to b1 is what we have. And then my opponent captured. I played knight f3. Okay, that's pretty good. I'm developing a piece. We traded that off, This was pretty good capture because it lets my bishop out, and so I'm okay with that. Bishop to e7, bishop to c4, nothing wrong there. Castles, castles, okay, so this is all pretty good. Had to retreat the bishop, that's fine, and then bishop g5. All right, now here I played the move f4, and my idea, I guess, was that I was opening up my queen to attack the knight, which is, okay, kind of good, and it worked out well in the game, but it's also leaving this pawn undefended, right? It's only defended one time, and black has two attackers. Now, two attackers. Now, it's a little bit interesting because if black captures with the knight, the computer actually likes this for me, takes, and then the move queen to f3, and it's a double attack on the bishop and the rook. Now, I don't think I saw that in this game. I don't think I was playing that many moves ahead. And then queen d6 is what it recommends. And it's interesting that it looks like a free rook over here, but I actually can't take it or I'm in trouble because bishop takes h2 check, king has to go to h1, and now black plays queen to h6, and I'm actually getting mated almost here, and there's nothing good that I can do about this. So the threat is that the bishop moves back, and then after my king slides over, the queen just comes down, checkmate. So for example, if I play a move like, I don't know, queen f3, we can just go check, and I have to move over, and then checkmate. So the only move here at this point is to give up my queen with the idea that I can put my bishop here and then like block with the bishop. So I don't get mated right away, but I lost my queen. It's not really good. So, you know, interesting position that all that was there. Of course, neither one of us, you know, would have seen that. You know, so it turns out that f4 was actually a pretty interesting move with a lot going on there. But what happened in the game was my opponent captured with the bishop, and then I just took the knight for free. So, you know, I was doing a couple things right here, making some sneaky threats and following up on them by winning a piece. So that was good. And, you know, I probably didn't calculate through everything, but hey, I was like 900 rated, so I can't complain about that. G6, and then I went back to F3, and again, we have this kind of fork going on here. So my opponent captured on D2, and, you know, instead of just recapturing with the knight, I realized that, hey, a rook is better than a bishop. And so I took the rook. So I'm kind of proud of my former self for that. And I have queen g5. And then I decided, okay, let's take. And bishop to h3. Now, this is a tough position, I think, for most 900 rated players. So I'll give you guys a second. Figure out what move you would play in this position for white. If you want to pause the video, go ahead and do that. If you're ready, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the best move. All right, so it's a little bit tricky because there is a checkmate threat here. Now, it happens to be defended at the moment by the queen, but there's also an attack on the queen, which was a discovered attack when the bishop left the square. And so that's why it's a little bit tricky to know what to play. And so the move that, you know, the move that Stockfish says is best is f4, which, okay, that's pretty wild. Basically, we're letting the queen get captured because then we're going to take the queen, and yeah, we're not going to get into that, but that's what Stockfish is. What was played in the game, though, was queen to b7, and so this was a nice move. I just sidestepped the attack from the rook and kept the queen defending the checkmate here. So not a bad solution. My opponent played rook c8, and then I played queen to f3, which I probably could have done right away, but all right, I didn't. For some reason, I didn't do that. Bishop to g4. And again, I would say for a 900, I found a pretty interesting move here. So if you want to pause and figure out what you would play here, and then we can talk about that, go ahead and do that. Okay, so if you're ready, the move that I played was knight to e4. And it's an interesting move because I was letting the bishop take my queen because then I was going to take my opponent's queen. And actually, it's one of the top 3 moves. It's not the best move. Computer likes queen g3 or h4 a little bit better, but knight e4 was the third move. So I'm kind of proud of myself for finding that. And then we had bishop takes f3, knight takes g5. And so, you know, I'm up a piece and a rook. So trading makes a lot of sense. Bishop e7. Again, bishop e4, trying to trade. Opponent played c6. And then I just brought my rook over. Nothing wrong with that. Trying to, use my pieces. Rook to d2. Okay, f6, knight here. This was a bit of a risky move. Whenever you place two pieces in line on the same file and there's a rook that can attack, a lot of times you're going to get into trouble. Now, in this case, it turns out that it's okay, and that's actually what my opponent played, and it's okay because I have this move knight c5, which defends my bishop and also, attacks. So in this case, it turned out okay. But you have to be careful lining up your pieces like that. Now, I didn't actually see that move, I guess, and so in the game, I took on d4 and ended up losing the bishop. So that was not great, losing a piece there. I let my opponent a little bit, back into the game. Rook to e7, rook to e2, so I was trying to trade the rooks. And then we had a rook to d7, and I don't actually know what happened after this point. The notation started to get all messed up, so I probably missed a move here or there. Like I said, this was the first tournament that I was actually notating in, so notation was pretty new to me. And so, I don't know, something happened. we lost that, but I did win the game, and you can understand why. I was up a rook. I probably did something to like trade, and then, I don't know. But I did win. That was round 1 of the tournament. Going back, I think overall I played pretty well this game. The things that I did good was I noticed the big threats, right? I noticed when my pieces were under attack. So like knights, bishops, queens, rooks. I didn't really blunder too many things there. What I did wrong was when I was reacting to some of these threats, I was a little too passive, kind of like I already talked about, right? Like bringing my knight all the way back to b1, pretty passive. Bringing my bishop all the way back to d2, pretty passive. Could have reacted a little bit better in those situations. But even playing passively, protecting my pieces and not losing the pieces actually turned out pretty well for me. All right, so one thing I thought would be cool to do as we go through these games is just to compare the player that I played against and how far they went with chess. And so I've looked up this person, and they actually made it to about 1700, 1760, I think was their peak rating, and then they kind of stopped playing. So I thought it would be interesting to do that on each game just to see, did other people stick with chess? Did they kind of abandon it at some point? And so this player went to 1760, and we'll do that with the other games as well. All right, so this was round number 2. I was playing against Bradley Sawyer, and this guy was rated 1139 at the time, which I was, like 900. So he was significantly higher than me. I say it was 900. I didn't know it was 900 at the time. I was unrated in the tournament, but afterwards it kind of gave me a provisional rating of 900. So I was black in this game, and let's see what happened. So e4, I played e5, knight f3, knight c6, knight c3, bishop to b4. Again, I didn't know any opening theory. I was just kind of developing my pieces and trying to attack stuff, and so that's what I was doing, I'm sure. d4, and I played queen to f6. Queen to f6 is not a move that I would probably play nowadays. When you bring your queen out too early, it can become vulnerable. And so off the top of my head, like bishop g5 looks like a decent move for white, just to develop a piece, gain a tempo on my queen. Now I have to waste time moving my queen. So I don't really like that move. I think now I would probably just do something a little bit more normal, like just take the pawn and continue developing. But queen f6, a3. And then I played an interesting move, e takes d4, which it's not terrible. Even though I'm letting my bishop get captured, I'm creating a counterattack. And so one of the things that I like to do, even from a young age, you can see this in my games, is I didn't always like to just retreat or, go with the obvious move. I like to kind of look and see, well, what else can I do, right? And so here, instead of just, normal thing would probably be to just take the knight, right? Maybe just retreat or something. But I'm like, no, let's try to mix it up and go for this. And so the computer is okay with that. It's not the top move. It says the best move was just to trade. But, all right, fine. So we did this. He captured, and then I captured on d4. And he captured here. And this is actually better for white. I should have just traded here and then played like d6. Just something kind of simple. And you can see how, white's pawns are kind of messed up here. And so those could be some good targets. So that was probably a little better than the route that I went. But I captured with the knight, and then I lost the bishop there. Then I played the move queen to e5, which, again, going back to bringing out the queen too early, your queen can get attacked, it can get chased around. It's really better to develop your pieces first and leave the queen unless you have a very good reason to do something with it. And I didn't know that at the time, right? Like I said, I didn't know any of these principles. I didn't know any opening theory. I was just kind of like, yeah, just try to fight for the center, try not to lose my pieces. I knew that much, and try to attack stuff. That's pretty much what my motto was. But nobody had told me, don't bring your queen out so early. It's better to wait, right? I didn't know that. So you can see here, I'm going to get into trouble with that. So f4, got to move the queen. Queen to d6. Knight to d5. So this is a pretty nice move by my opponent, creating the threat on my knight by blocking my queen. And so I'm already starting to be in a little bit of a jam here. Knight to c6, had to retreat, and then e5. Okay, and again, how many times have you seen my queen get chased around already, right? And so that's, you know, why you really don't want to do this. Now I actually played the best move, which was sacrificing my knight for the pawn. And the reason is, if I move the queen, like let's say back here to f8, because I can't go here, I can't go here, I don't really have a whole lot of options. Then there's this fork, right, and I'm going to lose castling rights and also my rook. So that's really not great, and so the computer agrees that what I played was actually the best move, which was just to capture the pawn. And so I got 2 pawns for the piece, which is something, but it's not enough, right? And then I played rook to b8, which is not a good move. My idea was that there's a fork here, and you know, maybe bishop f4 is happening next. I have to move my queen. The knight's going to come in, and I'm in big trouble. And so I thought, well, if I move my rook, then I'm not getting forked. I guess that's what I thought. I don't remember, right? But that's what I'm suspecting. If I'm playing this game today, let's see, what move do I play in this position? Yeah, so I think if I'm playing this game today, I play the move c6. And the point is, I want to get that annoying knight out of there. And I'm also, you know, if bishop f4, I'm threatening to just take the knight with my queen, right? And then I don't have to worry about the fork. I just want a piece. So that's not really an option for white. So that's probably what I would play, just to get the knight out. And then after the knight goes back somewhere, and then I'm probably going to develop my knight or maybe play d5. Rook to b8 is just, it's not a great move because, for a lot of reasons. I mean, there's this. It's just hanging that if my opponent wants it. Also, though, after bishop f4, this is still a really good move for white. Even though it's not a fork on my king and rook, it's still really, really strong. If the knight comes in, I'm not going to be able to castle. Then the knight's going to move, the bishop's going to be attacking, or the bishop could even take, and then my rook's got to move. And however you look at it, it's not good for me. So, you know, this kind of shows one of the things that I was able to do was see some of the threats, but I didn't know how to respond to the threats, right? And I think this is something that a lot of weaker players have a problem with. They see some stuff like, oh yeah, I should probably do something about this, but they just don't know what to do. They just don't know the best way to respond. And a lot of that is just learning tactics, learning different ideas, right? So like with experience, I can tell you like, okay, leaving the knight sit in the center like that is gonna own me. And so I need to get rid of that. That's why I would think of a move like c6 nowadays, right, to chase it away. Also, you know, when you're not developed, a simple move like sliding a rook over that really makes no threats doesn't help me develop. It just can't be good, right? It just can't be good. I just know that from experience. So that's kind of why I wouldn't play that move nowadays. But anyway, rook b8. My opponent castled, so they didn't play the best move, bishop f4, like we talked about. This is just completely crushing, but they didn't see that. They castled. Still a good move, castling. And now I play knight f6, which is a decent move because I'm threatening the knight here. And so that's actually not bad. Rook to e1. Okay, so now I've got a serious problem here. This is why you want to castle earlier. You don't want to leave your king in the center, because you can get into big trouble when a rook lines up on your king. In this case, it's lining up on the king and the queen. So really bad news for me here. So I played castles just to get out of the center with my king at least, but then we have bishop c4. So there's the discovered attack on the queen. So I have to do something with that. And I played queen to d6, which is all right, not terrible. But I mean, you can see like my bishop is stuck. This rook is just, I mean, what is it doing here? And look at white's pieces. This guy is ready to come out. This is in a good spot. The knight is awesome in the center. The rook is doing great. You can just see how the better placement of the pieces is so much better for white, right? And also, I'm down a piece, right? I lost the piece that I had to sacrifice earlier. So you add all those things up, white's much, much better. All right, so we have bishop g5. We traded some things here. I took on b4, and then bishop to e7. So there's a fork here, but I have queen to b6, which, you know, can get out of it. Now, interestingly enough, the computer actually likes to move d6 better, letting my opponent capture here, and then playing bishop to g4. And this is interesting because basically the computer is saying, like, giving up this exchange is worth it because it lets my pieces get out, and now I can actually try to do something, right? I have an attack on the queen. Now my rook can come over. Now white has to be careful that they don't make a mistake because, you know, depending on where this queen moves, for example, like somewhere like there, well, then, you know, now I have queen here creating this fork. And so you see how by making your pieces become more active, things just get so much better for you. And so that's why d6 is actually the computer's top choice. But I didn't play that in the game. I played queen b6 check, and then I moved my rook so that it wouldn't get captured, obviously. So queen f3, queen g6. Okay, that's, you know, I'm trying to defend, right? So that's not a bad move. We have h4, h5. Again, computer likes to move d6, and it's because I never completed my development. I'm kind of playing the game at a handicap, right? I'm just leaving my pieces sit around, and that's not going to be good. And then my opponent played bishop d6, which is actually a pretty nice move. He's just letting me take the bishop two different ways because there's this attack on the rook. There's this attack on the rook here. And so I can't take it, right? So I traded. And again, if I take the bishop, I'm in trouble. And that's actually what I did in the game, so I took it. But the problem is now the rook comes down, king has to go here, and there's actually a mate in 4 after this. So bishop e4, first of all, wins my queen, and I'm also getting mated. And you can see my pieces over here are completely terrible, doing absolutely nothing. So I played f5, opponent just captured it. I played b6, and there's actually a really nice mate in 1 that my opponent missed. If you want to take a second, see if you can find it, checkmate in 1 for white. Well, if you said queen takes h5 check, you are correct. So it's actually checkmate because I can't take the queen because the bishop is pinning the queen to my king. And then obviously the rook covers the escape route here. So that's just game over. Now that's a tricky one to see, and my opponent did not see that. They actually just took the queen. But I'm still, you know, completely losing here. We played some more moves because I wasn't going to resign. But I mean, it's pretty much over at this point. And there we go. So that's where the notation ends. That's game number 2, which was a loss. So at this point, I was 1-1 in the tournament. And I checked Bradley's rating, and he actually went on to become a 2,300 rated player, like 2325, I think was his peak rating. And so higher than me. I made it to about 2,200. So interesting to see that he you know, stuck with it and actually made it that far. So if we go back and just kind of summarize what went wrong, the big mistake I would say was bringing out my queen right here. Like if I would have played, you know, a more normal move like knight f6 or you know, even something like d6, just something that gets my pieces out, things would have gone much better. But once my queen came out too early, then it just kind of started getting chased around, and it got real bad real quick, right? And it's just because I don't have any pieces out, right? And my opponent has this knight in the center, and these pawns are harassing the queen. So, you know, don't bring your queen out early unless you have a good reason to. Otherwise, it's not going to end well. Usually, you want to develop all your pieces first, knights and bishops first, and then you want to start thinking about potentially bringing your queen somewhere. All right, guys, so those are the first 2 games ever in a tournament that I notated and had the record for. We're going to be doing more of these going forward, so keep an eye out, and we'll continue with this tournament and pick up where we left off and continue to kind of analyze these games and see what things I did then and what I would, you know, do now. Let me know in the comments if you like this, if you learned from this, if you want to see more of this, or if you think this is a waste of time. But as always, thanks for watching. Stay sharp, play smart, take care.